Welcome tonight to District 5 United's meeting. Our very special guest is Mayor Mahan. We're very glad to have everyone here. There will be folks here in the audience at Alum Rock Cruz Library that will be asking questions occasionally. They'll be coming up to an alternate device so that you can see them ask their questions. And Juan Estrada, who you know, will be monitoring the Q&A that is online. So if you would please raise your hand if you have a question versus the chat room, and we will try to remind you of that going forward. And let me just check to see if Leilani in the mayor's office is ready to go, and I will turn over the seat to the mayor.
Awesome.
Very good. Welcome, Mayor.
Thanks so much. Great to be here. Hi, everyone. Let me take my seat here, make sure. Awesome. Hi, everybody. And thank you all for being here and for inviting me. I appreciate it. It's great to be back in the neighborhood. I used to be a public school teacher just up the street here at Joseph George Middle School. So I'm very familiar with the neighborhood and appreciate how active you all are here in the community. Thank you for being so civically engaged. I know we only blocked 30 minutes and I do have some slides. I'm going to try to fly through them because I really want to just focus on your questions and your feedback. But Leilani, if we can do this really quickly, we want to at least tell you some of the things that were passed in the budget. So if we jump in really quickly, we have now completed the process. We've been talking a lot about getting back to basics. When I was out campaigning last year, I heard everywhere I went, every neighborhood, I remember knocking on doors right here, and I heard over and over again about safety, about blight, which is illegal dumping and graffiti and trash and encampments that we need to better manage. And of course, I heard a lot about homelessness. And so one of the things that we did in this budget proposal that I brought forward is advocate for new programming in these three priority areas. And that is not to say we aren't doing a lot of other really important things. We do everything from A to Z. We run an airport and we even have a little zoo out at Happy Hollow. So the city does a lot. But these were three areas that just over and over again were priorities for the community. And I'm happy to share that we actually secured 93% of what we requested in this budget with council approval last week. Yeah, let me just, for the folks online, just we're clear. We just realized you're not able to see the slides. So we're going to try to get somebody on Zoom. Leilani here is going to try to get on Zoom to show you the slides as I'm going. But yes, Gustavo, please go ahead.
4 million or 6 million that you weren't able to get for homelessness going to do to your plans?
Well,
we save that up. Yeah.
It means it's a good question. Yeah. So the question for everybody online from Gustavo was for the 6 million that we did not secure, but that we advocated for, what are we not able to do because of those dollars? And the biggest one was San Jose Bridge, which we're really hoping to expand. San Jose Bridge is a program that employs homeless individuals in our city to clean up the city with an hourly wage, 20 hours a week. And then the other 20 hours a week is focused on job training and helping people turn their lives around. The program has actually been quite successful, but it's pretty small. Last year served just under 150 people. I wanted to double the size of the program for whatever reason, and it didn't end up being a big point of debate, but the council ended up deciding to keep the funding level. And then the other is just less money for interim housing. Now, we still did get a pretty good investment for interim housing, but the council decided to fund it through ending fund balance, which just means if we have a surplus. Okay, so talked about the basics. I think I described those. Let's jump in. So we've talked a bit, for those of you who went to any of our budget town halls, we did about 50 of them across the city, talked about our very slow response times and lack of police staffing. We can keep going. Main reason for this is that we have a small tax base. Most of the jobs are actually in other cities. We have much less revenue per capita. We have far lower staffing across all of our departments, but in police, it's really particularly acute. Just 11 officers for every 10,000 residents. Other big cities have more than 2 times that number. So that was a big focus area. The other is that we have fewer people applying to our academies. So if we keep,
Is that the historical numbers?
yeah, so what that chart was showing was that 5 years ago, we had about 10,000 people a year apply to our police academies. And we really had our pick and could, incredibly high standards, which we've tried very hard to maintain, but we've seen a over 80% decline in people applying to our police academies. So we are struggling to achieve the staffing levels that we need. And so we made a real push in this budget to get our staffing levels to an appropriate place. Let's keep going. So a big line item was increasing the rate at which we're hiring in the department. If we go to the next slide, putting investment into more recruitment and outreach, going to campuses, talking to young people about careers in public safety, and speeding up our hiring processes. Another that I'm excited about, and we've been talking a lot about, but we're really investing in here, of those new roles we talked about adding, 6 of them will be community service officers. This is our attempt to begin to differentiate how we respond to different 911 calls. Not every call requires an officer with a gun. And so these community service officers are easier to recruit. They don't take as long to train. They don't carry a lethal weapon. And for certain types of community safety and service work, such as being a foot patrol in downtown, they may be a great solution. So we'll see, but we're expanding our community service officer program and really putting an emphasis on community policing, getting out of the patrol car, walking the neighborhood, getting to know the small business owners. Let's keep going. Automatic license plate readers. These have been, because we're so understaffed, these have been incredibly helpful in the last couple of years since we began using them in identifying criminal rings that are typically from outside of San Jose that are engaged in things like smash and grab robberies in commercial districts and catalytic converter thefts. You probably heard a lot about all the catalytic converter thefts. These have been really helpful there. So we wanted to make sure that they didn't go away. We have a very strict privacy policy. We do not retain the data. It just identifies the location of a vehicle on the license plate. And then if it's not being actively used in an investigation, we delete the data. But this is something that we brought into our budget to keep this resource. Let's keep going. Another is we hear from a lot of people that they don't feel comfortable using our public space anymore, particularly because of encampments. And so we're partnering with Valley Water. We're splitting the cost of having bike patrols, consistent bike patrols along both of our big creeks, Coyote Creek and Guadalupe River. We also, on the fire side, the big challenge around staffing has been specifically with paramedics. We need a medic on the engine for it to leave the station. We have a significant shortage. Last I checked, it was about 60 paramedics short in a department that has about 700 firefighters, which means we have a lot of paramedics in the department who are working mandatory overtime just so that those engines can leave the station. And just like with police officers, we are struggling with recruitment and getting people through academies and retaining them. The pandemic had a lot to do with this. I won't go into all the details, but we're putting dollars into solving this problem, more outreach, more academies, incentivizing laterals from other states, trying to make sure we can shore up our department. When I talk about getting back to the basics, it's not just for fun. It's that we have basic services that we're struggling to deliver with high quality and reliability for our community. And this is an important one, obviously. And then finally, on the safety front, my view as a parent and as a former public school teacher right here in the neighborhood is that the best dollars we can spend on public safety are the ones, and particularly criminal justice, right, are the ones we don't have to spend because we get upstream of problems and invest in our young people. And so while we don't run the schools and we have no authority over the school districts or the schools themselves, we can leverage our libraries and community centers like this facility to provide other services after school, in the summer, high dosage tutoring, we call it, students who have learning loss, giving them one-on-one tutoring or small group support. So we're putting $6.5 million into those kinds of programs, especially focused on the East Side and our traditionally underserved communities, and students who are clearly at risk because they've begun, even as juveniles, to begin to get pulled into the criminal justice system for their behavior. So let's keep going. Homelessness is probably the biggest challenge we face. To me, the most telling sign is that even though New York and Boston have roughly the same amount of homelessness per capita on a per population basis as we do, they have almost everyone sheltered. They're at 3% and 5% unsheltered, meaning out in tents and vehicles. We are at 75% unsheltered. In fact, a few years ago, we were at almost 85% unsheltered. We brought it down a little bit. So homelessness happens everywhere. Unsheltered homelessness and having thousands of people out in tents is not inevitable. And I have made the argument that while we absolutely need more affordable housing, we need a lot more housing, period. That is the cause of much of our homelessness. We also, by the way, divested from our mental health hospital system. We've had a lot of other issues, but fundamentally, the biggest driver of homelessness is high rents and low vacancy, and the fact that we've added 6 jobs for every home we've built over the last couple of decades. And we've been underproducing housing for years relative to job and population growth. So that is the issue. On the other hand, right now, our primary approach to homelessness is very slow and very expensive. We're building publicly subsidized, brand new housing that costs about $1 million a door in public subsidy and takes over 5 years to build. So we need it, and we need to find more efficient ways of doing it, and we need to get more private investment in housing. But if that's where all of our dollars go, we are inevitably leaving thousands of people in tents for years to come. And the number one thing I heard knocking on doors from folks was, we got to get people out of encampments faster. So if we dive into this, and just to put it in perspective, we talk a lot about whenever there's a homicide or a pedestrian, a traffic fatality, it's all over the news. Well, we have a multiple of that dying on our streets every year. It's a huge humanitarian crisis. Let's keep going. In terms of, this is more than you probably need. In terms of Measure E, we can talk about that. This is our primary source of funding for homelessness and affordable housing. We always split it between the two. The debate is over the ratio. Right now, 85% of the dollars go into new subsidized affordable units, 15% go into interim, so quick build communities. And these are some examples of quick build communities. We have 6 of them in the city. These units can be fully built out. In fact, we're doing one now with kitchenettes. 5 of the 6 sites have private bathrooms in the unit. They give somebody stability, privacy, safety, an individual room, like a little studio apartment with a bathroom. We can increase the quality of these, and we're learning how to do that. But these sites have been, in fact, I've visited all of them, met with the people there. They tell me literally that it saved their lives, that they were living in a tent down by the creek, and this gave them a chance at turning their lives around. If we go to the next slide, and you don't need to go back, but I didn't go through the numbers, but basically where we ended up is we're putting about $48 million into this solution, but still keeping the majority of the funds in new affordable housing production, more like 77 million. And I had argued for being closer to 50-50 because of the immediate crisis on our streets, but reasonable people can disagree. I think we need to act with greater urgency and immediacy given the crisis on the streets. So if we go to the next slide, I just want to tell you a little more about these because they are working incredibly well. We call these our quick build communities. We have 6 of them, as you can see there. That's as they came online. Direct correlation, as we have added these quick build modular units, these little communities, we have seen the number of sheltered people go up, and we have seen our unsheltered rate come down for the first time in a decade. Equally importantly, they work. People remain housed. Over 70% of people who have entered a quick build community remain housed today. This is a very high needs population. These numbers are significantly better than congregate shelter when you just stick people in a big barracks-like facility. Over 70% remain housed. Over 50% took sufficient advantage of the services and got to a place where they could actually graduate out to permanent housing. Sometimes with subsidy, but in other cases, just reconnecting with family or relocating to another less expensive place. The other interesting thing there is that the neighborhoods that took on those sites, despite a lot of opposition, actually saw calls for crime and blight go down in that neighborhood because we prioritize getting people from the encampments in those neighborhoods into those sites. So they actually make communities better because we're getting people housed. San Jose Bridge is the program we were not able to expand. This is probably my biggest frustration with this budget. I wanted to double the program. It's been working really well. I described it briefly earlier, but it gives people an hourly wage clean up the city and job training and job placement. Last year, we literally had one guy get a job at Tesla. Another guy became a truck driver. I met a woman who was becoming an electrician. It's giving people real skills and job placement and greater self-sufficiency. Let's keep going. Some preservation work for our mobile home parks. Go to the next one. Dashboards and greater tracking and reporting of where your dollars are going and how well our strategies are working, making all of that more transparent. On cleanliness, I'm going to go even faster. Obviously, we have huge challenges. We make our Beautify SJ team permanent. This was new during the pandemic, and we wanted to make these teams a permanent ongoing investment in addressing blight. I would prefer to do prevention. I would prefer not to be addressing symptoms. But I think that it is the demand of our community, and frankly, I think a fair expectation that the city be cleaner, and that means responding faster to illegal dumping, better managing encampments, addressing graffiti faster, keeping trash out of our creeks in the bay. And so we need a team that is permanently out there just cleaning up the city and responding to your 311 calls. Let's keep going. One of those teams is now we have a couple of folks we were able to because we're improving staffing and code enforcement, a couple of folks who will be out there doing proactive code enforcement in some of our commercial districts, including Alum Rock. Holding property owners is not meant to punish residents or small businesses, but property owners, particularly those big wealthy property owners who are failing to maintain their property, and make sure we're doing we're holding them accountable for fixing broken windows, covering up graffiti. And we don't want to burden them, but we do want them to join us in holding our property, the quality of the physical environment to a certain level. 311, are you all familiar with 311? So this really, I see heads nodding. This is an investment in making this tool even better. I believe you should be able to take a photo of a problem anywhere in our city, like a pothole or graffiti, and get a push notification back a day later showing you that it was fixed. It should be about as easy as ordering on Amazon for some of our city services. So we're moving toward that vision. Beautify your block. I'd love to come back and talk to you all about this as we get this up and running. We're actually currently applying for matching funds from the state. We want to empower our neighborhood associations to grow and engage neighbors in connecting with one another, building community, and doing positive work together in the neighborhood, planting trees, picking up litter together, other kind of neighborhood-based projects, emergency preparedness, and we want to provide grants and training and support to make that happen. Cleaning up our main gateways into the city, particularly along our freeways, and then our Cash for Trash program, which helps keep manage trash in our encampments. Anyway, I don't want to, and then you can sign up for our newsletter where we're constantly updating folks on these kinds of programs and how they're working. I'm very big on education, making sure people know what's happening and where their dollars are going. So I know that was a little long, but I wanted to give you the context on some of the things in the budget. A lot of other things are in the budget, but that's where we were concentrating our new dollars, our new attention, and where we're really trying to move the needle, because we heard from you that these were the big priorities. So let me pause there and see what questions you all have. Anybody want to?
Here, could you go up to the phone up there and ask you a question? And then speak louder for me because there's no clear. Leilani, if you can stop sharing the screen.
All right.
You're addressing Mount Pleasant School District. Well, Mr. Mayor.
Hey.
You talked about mental health, and I was on the COVID-19 recovery task force, and mental health was one of the areas in which we spoke on. Certainly there's mental health issues with people who are homeless or unhoused, but there's also people who are housed who have mental health issues.
Yeah.
As well as other issues that the task force covered were support for small businesses and connectivity on the internet, particularly on the east side where we are, being able to have internet access. That was certainly an issue during the pandemic for our young kids in school. So could you please touch briefly on some of those areas in terms of how it pertains to the east side in terms of mental health, support for small businesses, and internet connectivity? Thank you.
Sure, those are some big topics, but I can try to touch on them. I appreciate the question. On internet connectivity, I actually just had a follow-up meeting with AT&T today, and we're continuing to work with the big telecom companies to partner with them and incentivize them to extend broadband everywhere. And they've made some significant investments. As you probably also know, we used our ARP dollars for a variety of needs, but one of the big ones was expanding connectivity on the east side. We connected well over 100,000 residents for the first time to high bandwidth broadband internet access. We started a hotspot program where through your library here or any of the libraries in the city, you can check out a hotspot that will give you access to broadband. And those are basically at 100% utilization rate. So now we're talking to AT&T and Verizon about how to expand that program if we can get them to invest in that. It's not something where we directly provide the service, but we try to leverage partnerships through our library and get telecom companies to make those investments with us. We work with them, probably the place where we can get the most money in the years ahead, now that the ARP funds are basically, the federal rescue funds are basically spent, is applying for federal grants. One bright spot going forward is that some of the infrastructure money that the federal government has created will be focused on closing that digital divide. And so we're working with partners like AT&T to make sure we're applying strategically and getting as many of those dollars to San Jose as possible. So a lot of important work being done there and a lot more to go. You know, on mental health, similarly, as you probably know, it's not an issue that is formally within the jurisdiction of the city. Now, that doesn't mean that we can ignore it. Really, when it comes to health as an actual medical or health issue, that's really the state and the county. I think there are a couple of ways we can approach this, though. One is there are a lot of indirect contributors to mental health. Building more housing and bringing down housing costs and reducing stress on families is a big mental health factor. Making sure people feel comfortable using our public space and getting out and exercising and taking advantage of our public amenities and our great weather can have an impact. Creating, what I talked about, beautify your block. One of my hopes is that we'll be able to partner through your neighborhood associations to actually build a greater sense of community. We know that neighborhoods where people are on a first name basis with their neighbors are healthier, safer, and happier. They actually have better mental health, believe it or not. I know it sounds crazy, but social capital, community, people being connected, hugely important. And that's something the city can do a lot to support, even though we don't run the counseling services or the drug treatment center or the hospital or the wellness center in the school. None of those are city services. There are a lot of other things we can do kind of around the edges to build community and help people lead healthier and happier lives. I'm also advocating at a state level for, this is a small subset of the population, but reform of Lantrim and Petrus Short, the conservatorship laws that we have that have made it really hard in those really severe cases to get people the help that they need. So that's SB 43, Senator Susan Eggman's bill. The governor just announced a reform of the Mental Health Services Act, which would enable the state to add 10,000 new inpatient treatment beds. We have a huge lack. 50 years ago, we had over 300 inpatient mental health beds per 100,000 people. Today, we have about 12. We completely defunded the mental health hospital system. Now, we don't want to go back to having it look exactly like it did, but somewhere in between, somewhere in the middle is probably the right place. So you had another topic in there. There was small business. Yeah. Well, there are a lot of ways we can support small business. The foremost of which is speeding up permitting. That's actually one of the biggest pain. I mean, this concept of back to basics. When I talk to small business owners about city related issues, it's safety, it's cleanliness and blight, it's addressing homelessness, it's speeding up permits, it's often parking. It's these very basic kind of fundamental issues. So I think our back to basics focus on making our neighborhoods safer and cleaner and getting people housed faster will have a huge positive impact. When small businesses want to expand or invest or move into a site, they need a permit to make tenant improvements. If it takes 6 months to get that permit, they often can't afford to do it. They just can't wait that long. So getting our planning department fully staffed, which is something we're very focused on. We just took our code enforcement vacancy rate from over 25%. In fact, it was almost 30%. Down to 0 in the last 6 months. So that's another area where we're focused.
Well, you mentioned 6 months. I know a business owner who spent 3.5 years, and $300,000 getting various things done and still hasn't broken ground yet. In terms of his,
that's crazy.
And all he wanted to do was put a warehouse on his already existing property.
Yeah, I find that totally unacceptable. As you probably know, there are a lot of state laws that add a lot of red tape and process. We have laws that are very well intended, but because they're one size fits all, you can have an environmental review that makes a lot of sense if you were building new housing out in Coyote Valley or the Central Valley, but applied equally stringently to build on a surface parking lot in downtown next to a future BART station, and it can add 12 months to just get through the process. So we need to be smarter about our regulations, frankly. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Gustavo Gonzalez, and so you mentioned, getting out there with the community and doing things. One of my big frustrations this year was we had a landslide in Allen Rock, and it took 4 months and 16 days to open the park back up. Now, we have a lot of people up here in the hills that have tractors. I could have recruited several of them to help move the mess out of the way and get us back into the park. And I agree with the folks out there saying, look, why don't you open the parks that are safe and close the areas that are safe, right? Come on, we can be smart about this. Don't close the whole park down. And so I'm hoping that going forward, we could think of better solutions instead of just closing a park down for a half a year. And then I want to get back to this homelessness thing. It's frustrating for me to know that we have resources we can tap into, which you did a marvelous job of trying to do, but that some of our city council members believe that we should have these folks living in the streets for 5 years until we build permanent housing. That doesn't make any sense to me. So I guess I'm just saying for all of you, talk to your city council member, because our D5 city council member was one of them that did not agree to spend more money to house the unhoused. And that's a shame. And we should not be having all of these encampments in our side of town, because we shouldn't. People deserve some interim housing with toilets and showers and those sort of things. And so we need to push our elected here to see the reality that we need that. Thank you.
Thanks, Gustavo.
Juan, we just have like 1 or 2 more questions.
Hi, I'm Randy Smith, and I'm the pastor at Allen Rock United Methodist Church. We have a safe park site on our campus. We have a food pantry. We have been talking for years now about one of those tiny home projects on our campus. So I talk to homeless people on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And what I hear is they fall through the cracks. They have long wait times to get into housing. They have a lot of food insecurity. How can we have some conversations around figuring out what those gaps are and how can we fill them? Also, have you considered perhaps remodeling some existing homes to have smaller groups of homeless people that could be dotted throughout the city? And you could actually house many more homeless people that way than you can with these huge buildings. The tiny homes are, however, a step in the right direction.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor. Yeah, appreciate that. I'll share a couple of thoughts and then feel free to respond or add yours. First of all, thank you for doing the safe parking site. I think it's while it's not the ideal outcome, it's not the end result that we want for folks. It is, I know, very meaningful to people to have some of that support and stability and some access to services. Having talked to many folks who are in completely unmanaged and unsheltered conditions. You talked about how do we help people not fall through the cracks, and you're right. For most people, homelessness comes about because they are already economically living on the edge with little to no savings, with low income. Typically, housing affordability is a major issue, and then there ends up being some unexpected life event. It could be a health issue, it could be a fight with a roommate, it could be a divorce, it could be a death in the family, it could be any range of things that further destabilizes them. Could be an addiction, could be a range of things. We're trying to do more around prevention. I didn't specifically call it out, but we did I probably should add this. We put $5 million in the budget, which is the same as last year. So it's not a change, but it's still a meaningful investment in identifying folks who are at that moment of being at risk of not being able to make the rent. And the good news is what we have found is when we step in and offer them basically rent subsidy for a few months, we can usually we can help them stabilize and stay housed. In fact, we have seen that when you look a couple of years later, 97% of those people remain housed. And many of them are on no ongoing public subsidy. So I think prevention is big, but the greatest preventative measure and the way to have the most resiliency in the long run is to better balance the demand for housing with the supply of housing. And we're going to need creative solutions because $1 million a door in 5 years to build just doesn't scale. And the fact that we see fewer and fewer units being built each year tells you everything you need to know. We're not heading in the right direction. One of the bright spots and something that we can build on is what's called ADUs, accessory dwelling units. I would argue that we should also, so ADUs are basically prefabricated, they're manufactured modular little homes that can have a little kitchen and basically be a studio apartment, but they're built off site, much cheaper than building a new building, and they can be dropped by crane in somebody's backyard. We now see over a third of our building permits in the city of San Jose are for ADUs, and they are more distributed, more diffuse. So there's less acute impact in a given area. So facilitating investment in ADUs is big. I think supporting garage conversions. Now, I do know there are always trade-offs. I know there are a lot of issues with parking in this part of town. And so we have to be a little careful and thoughtful about how we densify. Here's the great tragedy, in my view. We desperately need more housing. Building more housing will reduce homelessness. Building more housing will help take pressure off the housing market and reduce homelessness. We have 8,000 housing units in downtown, transit supported, walkable, mixed use environment, right where we want more housing. We have 8,000 units permitted. They can build anytime they want, and they're not moving forward. And it's been true for years because the cost to build is so high that they can't get the rent on the other side to actually pay off the cost of building. It is actually financially irrational for them to build. So we have to figure out how to bring down the cost of construction in California. You can build the same unit in Arizona or Texas for about a third of the price. So this is the big policy question we face is, what are we going to do to bring down the time on permitting, to relax some of the fees and taxes and regulations, and to frankly make it easier to build the housing we need, especially where we want it by building up in places like downtown. So I don't have an easy, and there's no silver bullet to that question, but that to me is the key policy question at this point.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate what you're doing.
Tamara, go ahead.
Good evening,
Hi.
Mayor Mahan. Hi. I was just gonna give a little bit of feedback with regards to like the blight. As you know, I'm typically complaining the PG&E area. It's like, what can we really do about it? Because even if the city of San Jose comes by and picks up the trash, the next day somebody else is just dumping stuff over there. And I wouldn't want to see it fenced off. And I've always suggested maybe like putting a mural, like sometimes if you make something beautiful or, you know, planting things around there, because it's a major issue and it's also like a health problem. Now with
And Tamara,
regards,
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just want to make sure, is it the PG&E site that is fenced off over here on Alum Rock, or is it which site are you talking about?
no, it's right off of Mueller, right where Alexander begins. So it's right along the freeway. So it's past Alum Rock
Okay.
and before McKee.
Okay.
Yeah,
And you're saying there's a lot of illegal dumping?
yes, and it's typically people that are not from the area, because even the ones that are from the area, they are concerned about it, but then there are other people that are picking up items, and sometimes there are bed bugs or other like things that cause a health issue.
I'm
And so-
wondering if we can, this is something we can experiment with and maybe partner with you all on. We need to coordinate with PD and maybe others, but and PG&E, I suppose. I wonder if we could get a flock camera out there and try to
Yeah,
do some
yeah,
targeted
because
enforcement.
like about a week and a half ago, I was like driving to go somewhere, and then I turned around and this guy's just like backing in, dumping stuff. And it's really not us, because we really like
Yeah.
this neighborhood's a poor neighborhood. We're not constantly buying furniture. Like there's not enough need
I
for
understand.
furniture. Yeah, it just doesn't make any sense.
So-
And
A couple years ago, when I was first on the council, we significantly increased the fines for illegal dumping, but we haven't really meaningfully increased our capacity to do enforcement. So that may be an area where we could work together if you've got a hot spot like that.
oh
we-
yeah, yeah. Like some days I've been wanting to just do undercover and take pictures.
Yeah, that's so frustrating. Well, Leilani Gomez on my team can follow up, and I'll be happy to help reach out to some of our departments and see if we can do some kind of targeted enforcement
Yeah,
there.
yeah. Also, like, also like the same thing with like the cleanup, kind of like what you're doing on Saturday. It's like sometimes when we've had some like that, we haven't had like many people come in. That's it, but then they've gotten really filled. So yeah, but that's all. So thank you very much.
Thanks for your comment, and I would love to follow up, and Leilani will be sure to get your email or however you'd like to be contacted so we can work together. I really
Okay.
appreciate you all having me, and I'm
Thank you.
sorry that we have limited time. I'd love to come visit again and have a longer Q&A with you all if you'd like to, if that's useful to you. Awesome. All right.
Did we have other questions that weren't?
Yeah.
There was at least a couple.
Is there a lightning round kind of thing I can do? Is there anything? Yeah, please.
Are we considering UBI, universal basic income, for any type of situation to help the unhoused or those that are on that tipping point?
Yeah, so the county's been talking about, obviously there was a well-publicized test in Stockton. There are more and more experiments being done. The county is doing something with foster youth, targeting that kind of gap between becoming an adult and getting stabilized. We find a lot of foster youth become homeless in that time frame. We actually just opened a new supportive housing site that is affordable housing site that has half of the units specifically for the foster care youth who are graduating into adulthood. The challenge at a city level is how constrained our budget is. And what often happens when we increase public subsidy and we create a big new pot of funding to do something like that is then we see the private market or other parts of the market then increase costs. And so we saw this in public education or higher education, I should say. The federal government said, we want everybody to go to college who wants to and is capable of it. And so we're going to go put together a ton of money to finance low-cost student loans. And that was great. It did help many more students go to college, but the universities saw an opportunity to raise tuitions rapidly. And so we have to think about the economics of it. The challenge we face locally is costs are very high. And you got it. What's driving costs up more than anything is the cost of housing, which is going up anywhere from 5 to 10% a year in recent years. And what's driving up the cost of housing is the lack of supply. And unless we get at the root of the problem, we're going to keep seeing rent go up, which means we're going to then try to subsidize everything else. And we're actually going to see the cost of everything else keep going up. And so we're in this losing battle. If our only strategy, our main strategy is to just raise income and wages and increase the minimum wage, that's a start, but it also makes the cost of everything higher. And really what's driving this need for higher income more than anything. I know this is an employer. I ran a tech startup with 50 people. And every year, everybody in the company would come to me and say, I need a higher increase, a higher raise than I got last year because my rent went up. And so every year people need a 10% raise so that they could maintain their quality of life because the rent was going up 10% every year. And it just is a losing battle. We have to build a lot more housing or we're never going to get out of this mess. But I think targeted tests like with foster youth we're doing, and we'll see how that goes. Yeah,
Thank you, Mayor.
good question.
Last question, since you said
Well, is it a quick one? Yeah, I
Yeah,
can try it.
just trash around encampments is a big issue, more
Yes.
than the tents. What is being done to keep those areas clean while finding housing for those living there?
Yeah, well, on the housing front, we have a choice to make, and our city council just voted, and unfortunately, we were one vote short of making a different trade-off. We have a limited amount of money that can go to homelessness and housing. And I've argued that these quick build communities offer someone basic dignified housing faster and cheaper. I think that's irrefutable. Unfortunately, we were one vote short of being able to put more dollars into that solution, which means it will take us longer to give people an alternative to the encampments. In the meantime, we expanded cash for trash, which pays homeless individuals to manage their trash and fill up those green trash bags and put them out at the street corner every week to get picked up with regular trash service. We made the Beautify SJ team permanent, which does encampment management of our 50 largest encampments. We are doing Beautify Your Block to get people out to help clean up. We're expanding 311. We're trying to better manage and respond faster to blight in the community. But frankly, we need a lot more places for people to go, and we need them to be faster. And in my view, we need to stop letting the perfect be the enemy of the good, because if we say that the only answer is $1 million a door and 5 years to build, we're going to be stuck with this problem for the rest of our lives. So I'm trying to push us to be more efficient and more innovative and take some different approaches. If we can build safe parking and interim housing for everybody who needs it, we can end encampments in a matter of a few years if we go big on it, basically. All right, I'm sorry. Yeah, we're gonna do a group photo. Thank you I'd love to come back. I'm sorry I had to run so quickly.